The collision between ultra-luxury automotive pricing and residential real estate values has created a peculiar phenomenon where certain sport utility vehicles now command price tags that exceed the cost of entire houses in most American markets. This represents not merely automotive excess, but a fundamental inversion of traditional consumer value hierarchies, where a vehicle designed for transportation and off-road capability now costs more than the permanent residential structures where people actually live. These ultra-luxury SUVs exist at such rarefied price points that they challenge conventional understanding of value, utility, and what justifies expenditure of resources at this magnitude. The vehicles represent the absolute pinnacle of automotive excess, targeting customers so wealthy that the distinction between a $1 million vehicle and a $2 million vehicle becomes functionally irrelevant. And the purchase decision derives more from competitive status display than rational economic assessment. The Rolls-Royce Cullinan established the template for ultra-luxury SUVs commanding mansion-equivalent price tags. When Rolls-Royce introduced this vehicle, the company positioned it as an alternative to traditional sedans for ultra-wealthy clients who desired SUV proportions and off-road capability without sacrificing the opulence and exclusivity that defined Rolls-Royce ownership. The Cullinan's starting price exceeded $300,000, with fully optioned examples regularly reaching $450,000 or beyond. In most American markets, particularly outside major metropolitan centers, this price tag exceeds the cost of substantial residential properties. A Cullinan owner in suburban markets could purchase an impressive four-bedroom house with substantial property on both coasts for less than the cost of their vehicle. This creates the surreal situation where someone's primary transportation device costs more than their home, inverting the traditional relationship between vehicles and residential real estate in household budgets. The Lamborghini LM002 represented a historical predecessor to modern ultra-luxury SUVs, demonstrating that extreme performance vehicles adapted to SUV form factor could command exceptional prices even decades before contemporary ultra-luxury SUV competition emerged. During its production run in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the LM002 cost approximately $400,000 in contemporary currency, roughly equivalent to $1 million in modern money adjusted for inflation. This vehicle preceded the modern ultra-luxury SUV trend by decades, yet already represented a vehicle whose cost exceeded residential real estate values in most American markets. The LM002 established that wealthy individuals would indeed pay mansion-equivalent prices for exotic performance SUVs, creating a market precedent that contemporary manufacturers now exploit deliberately. The Bentley Bentayga introduced Bentley's interpretation of the ultra-luxury SUV segment, with pricing that positioned it significantly above traditional luxury SUVs, yet somewhat below the Rolls-Royce Cullinan. The Bentayga's starting price exceeds $180,000, with heavily optioned examples regularly reaching $300,000 or more. In many American residential markets, particularly in secondary cities and rural areas, $300,000 represents sufficient capital to purchase a substantial primary residence. The Bentayga owner might easily find themselves driving a vehicle that costs more than the home where they sleep, shower, and maintain their primary residence. This inversion of traditional asset hierarchies where transportation exceeds housing in cost represents a genuinely unusual phenomenon that would have seemed impossible to previous generations of wealthy individuals. The Mercedes-AMG G63 occupies interesting pricing territory, where it doesn't quite reach mansion-equivalent costs in all markets, yet approaches the threshold in many regions. A fully optioned G63 can exceed $300,000, a price point that overlaps with substantial residential properties in numerous American markets. An owner in Austin, Texas, or Nashville, Tennessee, could easily find themselves with a G63 whose cost exceeds their actual house value. This peculiar situation creates absurd comparisons where individuals might spend more money annually maintaining their vehicle than they spend on mortgage payments on their residence. The G63 represents not quite mansion-equivalent pricing, yet sufficient to create similar philosophical questions regarding value hierarchy and wealth allocation. The Range Rover Sport SVR, while not reaching absolute mansion-equivalent costs in most markets, still commands prices that approach residential property values in secondary markets. A fully auctioned SVR reaches approximately $130,000, a price point that exceeds median home values in numerous American cities. Someone purchasing an SVR in affordable housing markets could easily find themselves with a vehicle that costs more than the house where their family lives. This represents a meaningful inversion of traditional wealth allocation, where previous generations of wealthy individuals maintained hierarchies where residences exceeded vehicles in value. Yet contemporary, ultra-wealthy individuals increasingly reverse this relationship. The Maybach GLS concept and subsequent ultra-luxury SUV offerings from traditional sedan manufacturers demonstrate the industry-wide acknowledgement that ultra-wealthy clients will indeed pay mansion-equivalent prices for SUVs. These vehicles position themselves above traditional luxury segment pricing, reaching price points where the distinction between vehicle and residential property value becomes meaningless. A client willing to spend $400,000 on an automobile has essentially transcended the category where price considerations factor into purchasing decisions. At this price point, the purchase becomes entirely about status display, exclusivity, and the psychological satisfaction of possessing the most expensive variant available. The pricing structure that creates these mansion-equivalent SUV costs derives from multiple factors that accumulate to justify extraordinary expenditures. The manufacturing process for vehicles like the Cullinan or Bentayga involves handcrafting by skilled artisans rather than automated assembly lines. Individual vehicles require hundreds of hours of labor from craftspeople who customize every aspect according to owner specifications. The material costs exceed those of conventional vehicles by extraordinary margins, with interior appointments featuring leathers, woods, and textiles sourced from globally exclusive suppliers. Mechanical systems incorporate technologies developed specifically for these vehicles, representing engineering investment that extends to tens of millions of dollars across development and manufacturing infrastructure. The exclusivity itself contributes significantly to pricing that reaches mansion-equivalent levels. Manufacturers deliberately limit production to ensure that vehicles remain sufficiently rare to justify premium pricing. Production numbers for vehicles like the Cullinan never exceed a few thousand units annually, ensuring that ownership remains restricted to an infinitesimal percentage of the global wealthy population. This scarcity allows manufacturers to position these vehicles as investments that maintain value far better than conventionally produced automobiles.